On a quiet, pine-shaded expanse in the Sierra Nevada foothills, just outside the tiny community of Wilseyville, California, a twisted partnership between two men unraveled into a nightmare. Their names, Leonard Lake and Charles Nunez, a pair whose sadistic ambitions led to one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history. This is True Crime with Jackson. Leonard Lake was born in 1945. He grew up in a fractured home, bouncing between relatives. By early adulthood, he developed obsessions, power, control, apocalyptic fantasies, all laced with increasing paranoia. The kind of person who believed the world was teetering on chaos and that only the most prepared or the most ruthless would survive. Charles Ng, nearly 20 years younger, was born in Hong Kong. Troubled since childhood, he was expelled from multiple schools, first in Hong Kong, then in England. After immigrating to the United States on a student visa, he soon landed in trouble for theft and was court-martialed during a stint with the Marines. Their paths crossed in the early 1980s in the San Francisco Bay Area. Lake, a Cold War survivalist, built a doomsday bunker in the woods, stocked with weapons, supplies, and increasingly dark ambitions. Ng, fresh from a dishonorable discharge and attracted to violence, quickly became his enthusiastic apprentice. Their shared vision was grim, a hidden compound where they could ride out the collapse of civilization surrounded by obedient captives. The plan evolved, as such plans do, into something far worse. Between 1983 and 1985, people began to disappear around Northern California. At first, no one connected the cases. A missing friend, a couple whose car was abandoned, a neighbor who vanished after visiting Lake's compound. Each time, they left behind homes, families, and a total lack of explanation. Their method was coldly practical. Lake and Ng lured acquaintances and strangers alike to their secluded property. Couples, sometimes recruited by answering newspaper ads or through small personal connections, would arrive, never to be seen again. The men were killed, the women endured far worse. Held captive in a reinforced bunker, videotaped, tortured, and ultimately murdered. The pair documented some of their crimes on tape, casually discussing their warped philosophy as if it was nothing at all. Neighbors noted that Lake always seemed friendly, even if a bit intense. The property, though remote, saw a steady stream of visitors whose presence never outlasted their absence. For a while, the two operated without raising real suspicion. Lake's predilection for using his victims' possessions, cars, IDs, personal effects, only occasionally raised eyebrows. But in 1985, a minor crime finally tripped them up. Charles Ng was caught shoplifting a vice from a hardware store in South San Francisco. When he fled, Lake was detained. Police investigating the plates on Lake's car quickly realized they belonged to a missing person. Lake, ever the planner, carried a stash of cyanide pills in his shirt pocket. Calmly, he swallowed one during interrogation, dying before police could extract any coherent confession. With Lake dead and Ng on the run, authorities turned their attention to the Wilseyville property. What they found was a scene straight from a nightmare. A hidden bunker, piles of ID cards, credit cards, and possessions belonging to dozens of missing individuals. In the yard, authorities dug up countless fragments, bones, teeth, even entire skeletons, burned and buried in shallow graves or scattered by wild animals. The scope was staggering. Investigators eventually linked Lake and Ng to the disappearances of at least 11 known victims. But evidence suggested that the real count could be twice that. They found videotapes the men had made, recordings of terror and suffering, but also documentation of their chillingly mundane attitudes toward their crimes. Meanwhile, Charles Ng had fled for the Canadian border. He switched identities, slipped into Canada, and managed to evade capture for weeks before his luck and money ran out. Arrested in Calgary for shoplifting, again, that petty theft was enough to put him back on law enforcement's radar. After a protracted legal battle and years of delays, he was finally extradited to California. His trial was one of the longest and most expensive in state history. The evidence was overwhelming. Physical remains, tapes, receipts, and sequential patterns of theft and murder. Ever combative, filed motion after motion, but in the end, was convicted on 11 counts of first-degree murder. He now sits on California's death row as appeals wind quietly through the system. In Northern California, the scars remain. The Sierra Nevada land was bulldozed, the bunker sealed. Families of victims found only pieces, a license, a watch, a name scrawled in a notebook where a loved one had vanished forever. For all their talk of apocalypse and self-sufficiency, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng left nothing but proof of human cruelty and the banality of evil. Not a vision of survival, but a grim warning of what happens when planning turns into predation and fantasy gives way to atrocity. This is True Crime with Jackson. Thanks for watching.